Good morning, Richard. How are you?
Good morning, Stephen. How you doing?
Doing well. I believe this is episode 10 of our first series. And today we are going to be talking about construction in our circular futuristic city. And let's kick things off. I asked Richard yesterday, I'm going to ask you the same question today. How do you envision the future of construction inside your circular city?
Because the last four series, this is the fifth of that go under Kaylee, and Kaylee's our kinetic artificial learning environment. It's our AI for our circular city, and the whole concept is that we talked about the network data, we talked about the power grids, then agriculture and water and that system. And then last week we talked about transportation, and you brought up medical, so transportation and medical. Now that Kaylee has all that information, and like I said, the concept is Kaylee gets, in our fictitious city, there's 15,000 in our population, and they take an assessment test and questionnaire and survey, just like what we really want you guys to do to help us build the city. This is the concept, and Kaylee takes in all that information and from the data creates algorithms that provide for the city. And we have this our go philosophy is sorry, excuse me. Our go philosophy, go in Japanese means 5, and we take to reduce our carbon footprint and help sustainability. We take the best 5 of each category of the questionnaire. It could be 100 questions. We take the top 5 and we create for the city for the populace of the 15,000. And starting out, the reason why constructions last is because now that we have all 4 information, data, power grids, agriculture, water, transportation, medical. Now Kaylee knows what to provide for the city based on all the data and information you get from the populace. So it's not a dictator or an AI telling you what to do kind of thing. So now we can create the city, and we start out, and like so we start out with Kaylee is in the center dome, and you start out with the first step. You start out with the underground, and the underground has all the data lines, power grids, and then you need to build water systems, and also that goes to the commercial buildings and the homes. But you also need sewage going out, and the newest thing with the green part is you need a recycling system, to where you're not having garbage men on top of the traditional garbage men. All your garbage goes into 3 separate receptacles underground, and it goes to the system, out of the system, so that Kaylee knows what to do with it, whether to waste it or to recycle it, and like I said, and with the go philosophy, since we're only taking the best top 5, it reduces the carbon footprint, so you don't have that much to throw away. Everything's being reused or recycled. So that's the basic premise, and we can talk about the other steps too. So.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting is the word I would use. As we've talked about this whole principle of 5, the go philosophy, and everything, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's food or transportation, or in this case construction, buildings, that having a minimal amount of options sounds kind of boring, in certain ways. I mean, look at our world today. We have so many different architecture styles and so much history and things like that. We'll get into that in a minute. Mm-hmm. But to be able to simply choose one of 5 different homes, because it's already built in a way that you're reducing materials, there's not a lot of waste. A lot of people don't understand construction. I mean, I've done some flipping of some homes in my time, and there's a lot of waste. anywhere from 12 to 15% material waste as you go and you purchase materials and you buy it. And that's because of the way things are cut and the way things are, manufactured and stuff like that. Things are done in standards, by 2s, 4x8, 2x4, things like that. Those are standard things that people use on a regular basis. So what happens is that not everything is, divisible by 2. And so you end up with waste. So, and we'll get into this in a minute, of course, but building some of these pieces, out of these 5 different types of construction models, could be done in a way where you already know the size, right? Mm-hmm. It's a standardized size and a standardized block that is plug and play, essentially. So I think that's a really neat idea and a really neat philosophy as we look at a future development or future city, especially in our, fictitious circular city that we've been talking about for, the last 10 series or 10 episodes. Let's go back in time a little bit. Evolution of the city. I know that both of us both live in Tampa. So this makes it an interesting conversation. I live in the Seminole Heights area. And so I've seen in the last 5 years some really big changes in homes, where a home or property is left, there's a vacancy there. They're either remove the home or they have an empty lot from some reason, fire, or, the home was abandoned, that, they had to take it down, things like that. And there's a standard size type of home. It's the bungalow or, the shotgun style house, and they get torn down and then something new gets put up. So I find it interesting how cities evolve, how they go about, a whole neighborhood that looks like one way within a few years can be completely different because of a new style home we'll use the word cookie cutter. Because essentially, when we're talking about our future city, we're building cookie cutter homes, right? It's five different styles of homes, and developers love cookie cutter homes. Use the example, there in Tampa, I can usually use a style up in, in Binghamton, New York, where we have them called EJ homes. They're literally square boxes with a pointy roof. It's a 4-point roof, and they were designed specifically for the folks that work for Endicott Johnson's business. Central Pennsylvania, in the coal mining region, we had the coal miners' home. Very simple, very simple, rectangle with an A-frame roof, and it was just had a front porch. It was narrow. And it sat on a very narrow piece of property, roughly about, anywhere from 30 feet to 50 feet wide by no more than 100 feet deep. So that's a very small piece of property. And they were designed for the coal mining families and by the coal mining companies. So, not much less, what we're looking at with the circular city, we might have some more variety, obviously, in sizes, but, as those homes, burnt down, and I lived in one of those coal mining homes for a little while back in my life, but the house next door was a double lot because the two houses must have burned down and someone built a double home, and things evolve. So, what kind of experiences have you seen, when it comes to that evolution? And to add to that question, we know in our circular city that we have a level of destruction that creates the backdrop for the building of the circular city, and that will be a discussion for another date. But how do you see that evolution happening, as we look at what the city might be, and what it might be in the future? And for the viewers, before you answer, our backdrop is Tampa. That's what we've modeled our city from originally. And so, there's some aspects in this that resemble. So when we answer, and we're looking at, what does Tampa look like today? Well, if we had a catastrophe, what would the circular city look like? So.
The concept of the circular city, like I said, I'm inspired by the Venus project and the Aravana project on the circular city. There's other, like I said, other different concepts, but most the concept of the circular city is that you base it on population. And like I said, we've added the Kaylee and the AI part, which, you know, back when they thought about the circular city, they didn't have the AI we're going to have in the future. So we add the AI to it, but it's based on the population, and it takes in consideration that you have visitors and tourism and stuff like that. But that's what it bases it on. So like I said, ours is based on, in our story, is based on about 15,000 people in our city. So when Kaylee builds it, it's going to build however the circular city is built as wide as it takes to sustain 15,000 people. If you have 1 million people, of course the circle is going to be bigger. But once you've built it based on those that population, to defeat that sprawl where you have overpopulation, you can't overpopulate the city, because if you have another group, you would just build a separate circular city. So ours is based on you can take any plot in Tampa or anywhere, and hopefully Venus, Florida, one day with their group. You take a plot of available land, and this, like I said, this circular city isn't based on destroying something and replacing it. Most of it's just like you take the land that's available, and then you do your studies on what the land can provide as far as agriculture and stability and all that stuff. And you take the population, and like I said, in our concept is you use AI to develop the city. And once it's developed, you can't overpopulate it, because it's based on the population that you did when you started it. So yeah, so it's hard to say how, and that's probably the reason why we're having all this trouble with trying to take the politics and the politics out of it. Is how do you go from phase one of a project to develop a new project without ruining the other one? So that's a question we're asking our audience too, is how do you do that? And we can talk about in the next segment about my love for monolithic domes is one of the, I was even doing that in 2012 before I even thought about green and the environmental issues and stuff, and the thinking about it, but the monolithic dome thing is it's been around for a while, but it's one of those things that could help, but it's hard to implement because of regulations and governmental forces and stuff like that. How do you get the old, the old people to, that's empowered to change, yeah. And if the young people want it, look up monolithic domes. And I think there's one in Paris, Texas, monolithic domes. They're the ones that started that concept of, yeah. And we'll talk about that next segment, but.
Sure. What are you talking about now? I mean, let's go back a little bit and say, igloos. I don't know. I don't think you probably had the experience of making an igloo as a child, but someone like myself, we make forts and stuff in the snow up north here. Mm-hmm. And igloos, properly made, are very strong structures just because of the shape they are. And they actually are quite warm. Mm-hmm. When it comes down to like what's going on the outside of the igloo versus the inside of the igloo, it's the shape that's important in these, because a sphere is a very strong structure. It's why eggs, naturally are in that shape to a certain degree. Why when we look at building domes, we use the honeycomb, type of shape, because that's the strongest shape, known, or triangle. Either one of those is used, to make domes. But the thing that and going back, and we're still, talking about the evolution of a city, of course, I hear this from multitudes of people, and we'll pick on wind turbines for a minute. I think wind turbines are beautiful. I think they look beautiful. There's many people that feel like they scar the landscape when you see them. And to a point, maybe they have their own perspective, and I can understand how they feel about that. They may feel the same way that about circular dome buildings.
Mhm.
You know, the museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, the art museum is designed in a way to take on very, very heavy hurricanes and flooding. It has a beautiful dome-like side. I don't know if you've ever been to that museum before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So that one whole side's really neat how they made it. It's not quite a dome, but it has the right similar qualities of what we've talked about. And the strength in that is just tremendous. To see this whole glass structure and to know that you're allegedly safe from hurricanes, coming and attacking that part of Florida. But I can understand, and it has a special space. People like that museum; they think it's neat. But let's go back to what we started with, this evolution part of the city. What would you say if we were driving down along through, coming to visit me, up in my neck of Tampa, and all of a sudden you saw a dome house, versus some of these other style homes.
Yeah, it's a hard concept. Just Alex, I was involved with it. I want to thank my friends Tom and Diane, who introduced me back in. That was one of my first LLC. My first startup was to promote and consult with to help promote monolithic domes, and also we were doing shipping. I was doing shipping containers too, because that was the fad at the time. And it turns out that's not. It turns out that's not really green, but there's some green elements to it because you're using leftover freight shipping containers, freight containers. But I love the monolithic dome. And in our circular city, we had decided that in our discussions is that our commercial, we make the monolithic domes our commercial buildings for like the part of the school, library, mall, whatever commercial building. And the concept of the monolithic dome is that it's how it's built is you use you dig in rebarb into the ground, sort of in a dome shape, and also you put your insulate if you're going to live in it, if it's going to have people in it, not storage. You have to account for insulation, and that's where you put all your power grid stuff and your switches and stuff. And then you have to leave room for cutouts for windows and doors and driveways and stuff like that if you're gonna do that. But the whole concept is you put the rebarb into the ground so it's stable in there. And like I said, there's newer concepts now. And then you use the parachute type material. Or you put it around the rebarb and you blow it up, and then you can use a special mixture of concrete, and you put the concrete over it. It used to be when you spray it on the inside, you can of the parachute material, but now the newer one is, and I guess I'm assuming it's faster or more efficient. You can also put it on the outside of it, and the parachute material it stays there. It doesn't get removed or anything. So you're just using it to use it as a form, because you're blowing air into it and you're forming it, and you're putting the spray like a concrete spray-crete either on the inside or the outside, depending on your of the concept you're doing it. And like I said, and then you have to put fire retardant or insulation on the inside. But the great part about it is, you talked about with the igloo, is it's more energy efficient. So the same square footage of a dome is it costs 1/3 less to heat and pay for utilities for that building because of the size, and plus it's once you build it, unless you have a wrecking ball or whatever, it's there for 50, 100 years. So it's sustainable in that it's going to be there forever. And with our circular city, what you're trying to protect from is the elements and weather and climate change stuff. So you'll be safe there. It can withstand I think it's the highest F7 tornadoes, also hurricanes. It withstand hurricane. It's fire retardant because there's no shingles or anything, so it's very sustainable. But with our plug and play concept for the residential area, that's when you kind of balance. You say, well, I want to be able to build something that I can change later on or upgrade. But once you do that, how do you balance that with making it withstand the weather and elements and stuff like that? So if it's permanent, it can withstand weather and stuff. If it's not permanent, if you do a plug and play, so we had talked about maybe making the smaller residential areas more plug and play kind of thing, where you can upgrade it and yeah, you can do upgrades and advance it once we get better technology. And lastly, I'll say that they're using Spraycrete, but I heard there's an argument, like I said, it's political. There's arguments that polyurethane is better too, but is polyurethane green? We're asking the young kids and the experts out there. They said, well, use polyurethane. You build it once, but is polyurethane green to create it or whatever? So that's the question. But yeah, so our commercial buildings are going to be domes so that it can protect us from bad mega storms, or so that's our concept for that. And then we'll talk about residential next, I guess.
Yeah, it's a construction styles and techniques, and then types of homes. We'll just blend this whole thing together. So currently, then in our current era, there is a lot of really neat evolutions in construction of buildings. Some of my favorite ones that I find is preformed concrete. You see them going down the road on trucks all the time for buildings, and you see them getting stood up. They increase the speed of the build for the building overall. What a lot of people don't realize is that reinforced concrete that's is actually built, using a machine that holds the rebar. And then once the concrete's almost dry, that let go, and the rebar basically compresses when it's let go under tension, compresses the concrete to make it stronger. So they can use that process for like retaining walls, for building walls, for all kinds of different concrete type buildings, which is great. Speeds up the process. The concrete's stronger. It lasts longer. It's more impermeable to weather. Up north, we have this thing called, we have a lot of salt on the ground during the winter, and down south, you have a lot of salt in the air. Salt's highly corrosive to steel and also to concrete. Mostly to steel. That's where you have the biggest issues. I've seen a lot of new evolutions in wood fabrication. Where we're taking particle board and turning them into I-beams, for residential homes, instead of using single pieces of wood, and relying on them not to warp or bend. These I-beams made of particle board are stronger. It takes less effort to make, less wood to make. I'm not sure on the manufacturing process and the footprint for them, but I've seen them used a lot in northern homes. I've seen them used down in some of the southern homes as well. One of the coolest things that I recently saw online was a 3D printer to make a house, and I forget which university it was. But they literally had a machine that piped concrete, almost like if you were taking a tube and with icing and going around and around and around, until you've made a gingerbread house or something. If you could make it out of gingerbread, they did the same thing. They used concrete. They had a design in a computer, and the concrete machine went along and just made the walls. It printed them in layers that looked just like it being piped icing, which is really neat. And as they're going along, the humans are going along, sticking boxes in for electrical here, or adding something there before the concrete dried, as the machine printed, and they could build the whole house was basically made out of printed concrete. So that, I think, is a really neat concept, because now you're reducing the amount of waste, because only what's being put in the home is coming through the machine. It's not, cutting a little here, cutting a little there, and all of a sudden you have a whole dumpster worth of, construction waste that was brand new construction materials to begin with. So I think that was one of my favorite ones. I have seen I haven't seen them make one of these domes yet that you're talking about, Richard, but I definitely know like some of those blow up domes they use for indoor soccer or baseball fields and things like that. I've noticed that they started to get away from them as much as metal buildings. We have one in Binghamton here, and it recently got a hole in it. And now it's just a big flat piece of grass they're going to rebuild as a metal building because the cost of fixing a hole in one of those things, and they're constantly have to have air in them. So there's a machine constantly running to blow them up. So no matter what you're doing, you have to have air in them to keep them up. So, the
ones I'm talking about is total concrete. You're just using the air part to make it as a frame and mold. But
when we were talking, I thought about that, blowing it up with air, and once it's done, deflating it. Now you have a concrete, dome, which I thought was pretty neat because it kind of goes back into the concept of reinforced concrete. When the balloon, if you will, deflates, the concrete then, has to hold each other up and compresses in space, and becomes stronger as it finishes its curing process. So I thought that was a really neat concept, if you're making, concrete domes. So, but what we also, we've been discussing is some of these homes where they're made in another place and they dry them up and not a mobile home. I want to express that they're not mobile homes, but they come on a truck and they literally set them down and someone pushes a button and they unfold as a house. And that there's some of those concepts currently being developed and worked on. And I think that those are cool because what's nice about that is if you want to live in New York and then one day you go, I want to go to Arizona, you call the company, you pack up your stuff in a pod, you ship the pod there, the house folds up, they put it back in a truck and off it goes. And it's made out of, ironically, old shipping containers, but I think what's really neat about the circular city idea is that you can plan ahead better than what we do now in current urban development, where you have a plug and play services, for your sewer, your electric, and your water. So envision driving one of these things up as one of the options that Kaylee provides. It opens itself up as a house. It literally gets attached to the ground, so it can't go anywhere during a storm. Made of materials that are storm resistant, for high wind and, rain and so forth and so on. And it connects directly in the utility. And if I decide that if I have a bigger family and, things go on, I don't necessarily have to move myself from my property. I just spray it in my house, fold it back up and off it would go. And then the bigger house could show up if it fits on that piece of land. Right. So, there's a lot of options here. For building 5 different types of homes or buildings that are made. And one of the things I thought was really also a savings for materials was prefab. If the home's being made somewhere else and brought to the space, there's less disturbance in the neighborhood for construction. There's less disturbance for manufacturing. And you already know how much material you need because you're making the same thing over and over again, where you start to find ways of reusing materials, hence plywood, why it was invented, or particle board, which I think I enlightened you with yesterday. That's wood chips glued together.
Yeah, I learned that there's more glue than wood. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's more glue than wood, I feel, some days. Which it has a great place as long as it stays dry. If particle board gets wet too much, it becomes an issue. But so is plywood. Plywood is just layers of wood and glue. So, but it's an idea of reusing materials, from where we were before. Why cut one tree and make boards and take out more trees when you can take one tree and literally cut layers off of it and then glue it together? So you use less trees to make a piece of plywood than you do with the same amount of trees to make the siding or whatever to cover the same space with regular boards. And it's a lot easier to make and takes less energy to make.
Yes.
When it comes down to it. So, if we're prefabbing homes or other things in a factory and it's being moved, the innovation alone of saving materials and being a lot more efficient with materials improves in that space than it would on the job site with individual contractors.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Mhm. Yeah, to add on to answer your earlier question about construction now compared to what we're trying to do and other futurists trying to do more green things. I like phasing in like the evolution of the buildings now. Like I said, they're already doing it. The one I like the best you just talked about is that you talk about manufactured home or prefab homes, and the newer versions are they're being 3D printed in a factory somewhere.
Mhm.
And the standards are great because you're not, if you're building a building on the site and it takes 6 months to build, and plus if you're up north where you are, you have to fight weather, and down here you have to fight hurricanes and weather. So there's delays, and you have to have more manpower because you're bringing stuff to a site to build it.
Mhm.
Where you can build the same building and have better specifications and better tolerances, or I can't think of the word, but it's more efficient. Like Legos is like build that same. If you're going to build 2 homes on site, it'd be more efficient to build the 4 walls, the roof, and in a manufacturing place. And in the future, if they're 3D printed, they're so specific that both walls of the building are exactly the same because you're building in a site, you're building in a warehouse where there's no weather issues.
Mhm.
So I love that concept, is that you're building like 4 walls and a roof, and the roof can already have solar panels or solar systems or whatever, Tesla shingles or whatever you want to put on there, already on there. So and like I said, this is I don't know if you coined the phrase or trademarked it, but having plug and play buildings, sort of
Mhm.
like the circular city is like a motherboard, and you're either building stuff on the motherboard or you're adding stuff to the motherboard. So it's like basically you're building it somewhere else, and you're bringing it to the site, and then you're plugging in, and you have a standard system that allows that. Because of Kaylee, we know how many people, what they want. If you want to live in a dorm situation or a community situation or apartment condo situation, they'll build that many condos in that.
Mhm.
If you're an introvert and need to be alone, or if you're like a rural person where you want to be alone for a while, you want to live alone, you think better alone, they'll build single modular
Mhm.
homes that will be on the outskirts of where the agricultural belt is, at the end of at the quiet part, at the golf course part of our circular city. But if you
Mhm.
love community, love to be with people, you get your energy from. If you're an extrovert and you have, Kaylee knows you're an extrovert, you love to be with people. We'll have more community centers and stuff like that where when you do your sports
Mhm.
or do our hollow deck, fun arcade. We haven't thought of a name yet for it, but like a community place where you play and have fun. They'll have more community buildings where people are together, fourplexes and stuff like that, or buildings, or even um, you know have towers and stuff like that. But like I said, it will just be based on. That's why we're kind of not knowing what to build. We have the platform, but we need, like I said, we need people, and we need populations to actually have
Mhm.
the data to know what to actually, or which of the 5 of all the things we're talking about to build. Yeah. So yeah.
Did you see a thing I sent you yesterday? I don't know if he's read it yet. The roof?
I did about the car.
No, the house roof. It was that whole concept we were talking
Oh,
about with
okay. Yeah.
solar,
Mm-hmm.
where It was interconnected roof tiles.
Okay.
So, and it looked like, it almost looked like the terracotta roofs we have down in South, you
Okay.
know, the Spanish or Italian tiles. And was neat because the whole thing was in an interconnected system of solar panels, and it was the roof. It wasn't the roof was there,
Mhm.
and they added something onto it. They literally, when they built this house, they had, it was designed with this roof being part of it, and it was seamless, where it was like the peaks and valleys were part of the tiles as well. So the whole roof became a solar panel, which I know we've talked about in our power grids conversation, but I found it interesting that I happened to see it yesterday. And I thought to myself, I go, one of my favorite building materials as a kid was Legos. And they made an adult version of this for homes made out of wood now.
Okay.
Where, we have the Lincoln log home. So if you were a kid and you like Lincoln logs, you literally can buy these logs and they get stacked, and put together and you make your log cabin. But this one looks just like a Lego brick, sort of. It doesn't have the little pokey things on the top, the cylinder poke, because that would, obviously be a Lego. This had a V ridge on it. So the blocks interconnected. And then the services like electric and water and stuff would go inside of it because they were hollow. So then they could blew, once you were done, you blew insulation in the holes and it would be insulated. But I thought it was really neat because you literally order your Lego kit, and I think that'd be kind of fun. You'd be like, hey, I got my instructions here. Oh, it says, let's start with truck number 1 instead of bag number 1, Oh, we're on the truck number 2 now, So, but if we took that and added this roof to it, it would be a full Lego kit, and it could power itself. So I think that there's a lot of really exciting and bright things coming along for construction. And I think that, even in our discussion now, we have our own ideas about a circular city, but, by the time we get to the year that we note, in our storyline for when the circular city happens, I think that it'll be surprising to see all the different kinds of innovations in construction that are beyond concrete and wood, that are quicker to build, more efficient, more efficient in as a home, but also more efficient to build. I think that it's going to be it's a really neat topic. And I think that, to recap our series for a minute, all these topics have been really neat, all these parts that take to make a system for people to live. And I don't think the people really appreciate it as much as they do, from, our construction to where we get our food, how transportation actually works, who thinks about these things, how does it get planned? How does it get put together? How do we take care of each other? All those parts that go into any city, any modern city are just unfathomable amount of information. And I think that, in a realistic sense, out of our fictitious world, the AI that we have, the Internet of Things that we use now to give metrics and measurement, and the insight that we look at things now in this current century is completely different than we did it in the last few decades or even the last century. That I'm really excited to see what would happen if I'm so grateful or so lucky to live another 100 years, to see what happens, what really changes, and how we take the old and either replace it with the new or improve it so that's new. And I think that would be a really neat thing. But I think that, as we look at our, from top to bottom in our series here, we've dealt with the circular city. We've talked a lot about the parts. We're setting a backdrop for a story that's coming out in the future. And I think that there's a lot of exciting pieces that both of us would love to hear everybody's input on and really give us your insights on the topics, either individually or together. Let us know what you think as we go and we develop the next round and series of our podcast.
Yeah, we're trying to like blur nonfiction and fiction, or actual and reality. Kind of, we're like, if we have 100 concepts and futuristic things, maybe 10 of them will become real in 5 or 10 years. That's what we're trying to do, that kind of teaching, yeah, like inspire the young youth to, through, and like I said, our 2 topics are advanced technology and environmental issues. We want to help solve those things through our learning platform. And we're starting with like a fictitious thing, but we want to get to it where there's, out of 100 or 1,000 things, maybe there's a few actual real things that might come out of it. And we need the brains of the next generation, Gen X and Gen Alpha. This is for you. So, yeah.
Hit our subscribe button. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, we set the platform. You tell the story. Thank you. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you for watching our podcast. Subscribe to our channel. Let us know what you think and what you would like us to talk about next. Don't forget to check out our website at prefectureisp.com.